Welcome back to episode 11 of It's Kind of a Big Deal. I'm Jenna Horton.
And I'm Olivia Bondi.
This week we're going to talk about our first-time home buying experiences.
Yeah, Jenna's going to start us off. I think something that came up in conversation last week when we were planning our episode was that we have so many first-time home buyers that...
Well, they want the champagne on a beer budget.
They want the champagne on a beer budget to the point where they're waiting for that perfect house so long that they've timed themselves out of the market.
100%, yeah. They've lost so much by not just getting into the market. And so we wanted to share our first-time home buying experiences because they weren't glamorous by any means. And the main topic of this episode is that your first home is going to fund your dream home.
Yeah, it was funny. I was at a showing on the weekend, and the first-time homebuyer's dad said, she was like, it's so cute. And he was like, every house is cute when it's your first one. And I was like, mine wasn't cute.
No. Mine was okay, but there's a lot of things about it that weren't cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The location wasn't cute.
The location was far from cute. Yeah. And I think right now we always work with first-time home buyers every day. We're working with first-time home buyers. And so funny example, just last night, I went to show a house and this isn't necessarily just first-time home buyers, but could be an investor or whoever. Anyways, went to show this house. It's listed for $199, so a lower end price point. And they were smoking in the home, is what it is. Left the house, got in my car, immediately felt something in my sock, flea bite. I was like, oh gosh, this is not okay. I called Olivia. I was like, what do I do? I
got bit by a flea.
I just got bit by a flea.
Not the first house we've sold with fleas.
True. Our first deal together.
There was fleas.
Yeah. So first-time home buying is not always glamorous, and sometimes things come up, but you just got to get into the market.
Yep. And making sure now that we're in a buyer's market and there is more options and you have the ability to do an inspection.
Yes.
Making sure that you exercise that ability.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So Jenna, do you want to talk about kind of your journey? I think a key word here is that we've always said your first home funds your dream home. And I think that was very much true for you.
Yeah. My experience throughout owning real estate has really been that. So I bought my first house with my partner at the time in 2016. It actually closed on my 18th birthday, which was super exciting.
Yes.
And I actually didn't see the house before we bought it. He had come down and taken a look at it, and I didn't view the home. So we bought that in 2016 for $160,000, and it was move-in ready, but the big sacrifice for us was the location. So if you're familiar with Sarnia, it was on Wellington Street, and there were often times where you would hear people screaming in the street, or there were needles, and I mean, it is what it is. I think that area is much better now.
I also want to mention that you're a scaredy cat.
Yes.
Yes. The worst scaredy cat. And your partner was working away for extended periods of time.
Exactly. So I did have a security system that helped me sleep at night. But I was living alone, and I grew up in the country. So I wasn't used to neighbors really. And so to move into the south end of Sarnia was a really big adjustment.
Yeah.
But it was a sacrifice that I made to own a home, because that's all that we could afford at the time. I was just saying to Liv that when we were looking for our first house, there were only 4 homes available in our price point. And 2016 was kind of the beginning of the busy market. Things were starting to pick up and increase, and we were seeing some multiple offers. So there wasn't a lot of time to wait on these things.
Yeah. 2016 was when things were really heating up and the multiple offers.
What year did you buy your first house?
I think 2015?
Yeah, probably.
It might have been 2016 too. I'd have to check.
It was starting to pick up though.
Yeah.
So
I competed on my house.
I think we did too.
Yeah. Which is funny.
It is funny, yeah. Because I think too, people think COVID was when that really happened, but I think it was long part.
Yeah, the housing crisis that's been going on has been going on for longer than we think.
That's almost 10 years.
And I think that's something that's important to recognize as well. People get so caught up when they're like, oh yeah, when you bought your house, it was $175,000. And that is cheaper than, last night you got bit by a flea at $199. Whereas we bought houses that were significantly better than that for less money, but it is all relative.
Yes.
The people that bought earlier are now in the market where they've made money, and we'll talk about that when we get to kind of my first home and all that.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And at the time, so we had bought that for $160, and like you said, it's all relative, because I think at that time I was maybe making $30,000 a year.
Yeah.
And so
what was minimum wage then?
I don't
probably
low
14?
Yeah, maybe a little less.
Maybe less
yeah,
than that.
probably 14. Yeah. And I was working in the mall, and so it took me a long time to save up my portion of the down payment. And we put 20% down at the time, which I think was around like, what would that be, like 30 grand?
Mm-hmm.
And so anyways, we lived there for a few years and then did some renovations, added a bathroom into the basement and finished the garage. So these are kind of the things that we talked about last week's episode, was doing some renovations, but at the time doing it on a very like tight budget. Anyway, so then we sold that place for $240 in 2019. So that was a good return. Bought it for $160, sold for $240. And then we purchased our property on Churchill, and we bought that for $485 in 2019, and that was also multiple offers. So my property on Wellington we had sold off market, so there wasn't multiples on that.
And this is when you were in real estate.
Yes, I had now gotten my real estate license.
Yeah, because that's something for both of us when we bought our first house. We were in real estate, and then later on down the road, we got a license.
Yes, and I mean we can talk about my first realtor experience.
Yeah, maybe
it wasn't pleasant.
Maybe
we'll get back to that. So yeah, bought on Churchill for $485. Lived there from 2019 to 2021, and did some renos, but really nothing too crazy, like a kitchen reface. And then sold that in 2021 for $750.
We buffed that baby up.
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah, you and I, when we decided we were going to list it, like we were in there painting all hours of the day and night.
Yeah,
staging.
I don't know how you roped me into this, but
I don't know
you painted like I'm not that bad at painting then.
No, I think you've gotten worse.
Yeah, I have. Yeah, we painted all the trim in the house. Like I was Inspector Gadget, and I was like, we need to clean this up.
I think it was like also since getting into real estate, I noticed more fine details about listings that I probably wouldn't have noticed before or wouldn't have cared about.
Well, and Mike came and absolutely
destroyed it.
The
second he left my house that day, we both cracked a pint. Like we were like, this is traumatic.
Yeah, cracked a pint and a paint can. Yeah. And started hitting everything.
Yes, white paint everywhere.
Yeah, it's easier to paint than to clean sometimes.
It's honestly true. Baseboards for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that house was a great investment.
That was a great investment. Yeah.
Yeah. So how many years did you own it for, and how much money did you make?
I owned it for 2 years.
Yep.
And we made $485, sold it for $750. So what's the math on that?
A lot.
And then that's really what funded the dream home. Actually, you know what? In addition to funding the dream home, it was that as well as a couple rental properties that I had bought in that same time period, and then refinanced the rental properties, sold that home for a very good return, which then funded the dream home on Black Ash.
And I think that was part of it, was we knew how much money we had to squeeze out of Churchill. And I say we as in you and I.
It was a joint venture.
So that you were able to buy the Black Ash, right?
Yes.
Like we were
like the numbers were tight.
They were tight. We were,
we were like
you needed
it.
that price that we had set.
Yeah, to make the dream home happen. And so then we had bought Black Ash for 1.4 in 2021.
Yep.
And so really, when you look back at it, 2016 is when our real estate journey started, and we bought that for 160 with 30 grand into it.
Yep.
And then we somehow turned that 30 grand of a down payment into just climbing up the real estate ladder and making these investments, and then it turned into owning this $1.4 million property, 12 acres, beautiful home.
Yep.
And so
the dream home.
The first home funded the dream home.
Yep. And I think that was part of your ex's spiel during the separation, was all of this money came from our homes. And I was like, yeah, that's the kicker.
Right.
Our homes.
That
we, including me,
Olivia as well,
blood, sweat, and tears into building that equity.
Yeah, it was a journey, right? And that was definitely a sticking point in the separation. That it was all like we climbed that journey together.
Yeah. And the money that you guys had put into it, like none of it was substantial. No houses got a full reno. They all just got like small continuous improvements and market timing.
Exactly, which like the timing in the market was great. And then it turned out that we sold Black Ash 3 years later for 1.6. So that was like 3 years, another $200,000 increase in that. So
another great return.
And honestly, like that wasn't really the best time to be selling that property. It was just life circumstances, not market timing. So
yes, you wouldn't have sold that property at that time if you didn't have to.
No, exactly.
Yeah,
but it still turned out to be a good investment. And so, I think that's just kind of going back to getting started, getting in the market, and then with the right market timing, small renovations, you can turn your dream home into a very
Yeah, and I think it's important to not compromise. Like, find out what your non-negotiables are, and don't compromise on those things. And you can't have a whole list of them, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
Like, if your budget, like today, I would say, I don't want to say a budget because everyone's different.
Yes.
But you know what I mean? Like, when I was buying, and my budget was probably $200,000.
Yeah, same with us.
I had certain things that I wanted. Location was the most important to me, and I wasn't willing to compromise on that.
You wanted Corona.
I wanted Corona.
Yeah.
Interior finishes, I was willing to compromise on.
Yeah.
Clearly. My house was an estate sale. It had good bones, and it was in the location that I wanted. But the inside was like horrible.
Yeah.
Like really old cabinets. Every single square foot of that house needed to be updated.
Right.
So I bought that house, I think it was in 2015, for $175. And I owned it. We renovated it, me and my dad. I was always scared when that house came back on the market. Bless my father. But the work that we did in there, not because of his skills, but because of my budget. Aaron and I were talking last night. The flooring I put in that house was 97 cents a square foot. Because this was in the time of laminate, right?
Right.
It looked good from far, but it was far from good.
Yeah.
Like, that flooring is terrible. I can't. So I was scared when this house was going to come back to the market. So I sold it in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah, I owned it from 15, 16, 17, 18. Yeah, 3 years later. So I bought it for $175. I think I probably put 30 into it. And I sold it for $270.
Great.
So not a huge return on investment.
I think if you make any money on your first, like, you're doing well.
Yeah, and for the work that I did there, it was good. I might have not even have put 30 into it. That might even be a stretch.
Right.
What I did in that house that was the kicker for me was I put the basement apartment in.
Yes, and this is huge for first-time home buyers.
Yeah.
I was just talking to a mortgage broker about this last night for my clients that I was showing those properties to, that it's a good hack to being able to afford more.
I would not have been able to afford that house, period.
Right.
I also don't even know how I got a mortgage because I was a co-op student. So
crazy. Creative lending.
Very creative lending because like I was on an 8-month co-op.
Wow.
There was an end date to that income that I had, right?
Yeah.
Whether I didn't mention that or what the case was.
Gray area.
I got a mortgage on my own. I didn't have to have a co-signer, and I was, I think I was 18 years old, which is wild. And I was also going back to school. Like, I was still in school, so.
It makes no sense.
So my tenant that lived in the basement, I took the kitchen cabinets that were upstairs and I moved them downstairs. Because I couldn't afford to actually, there was no basement apartment down there, but when I saw the house, the back had like an entry and there was a door off the kitchen. So I was like, this is the perfect setup for 2 living dwellings in one. So I moved the kitchen from upstairs downstairs. I rented that apartment out for $1,200 a month, which covered my mortgage at the time. I think my utilities, all my expenses for the house. I lived there for completely free. So even when I went back to school, I didn't have a problem paying for the house still. And I would not have been able to do that without that. I also had another roommate that was living upstairs with me.
Right.
So,
which is something that you've done even in other houses. So like it's a pretty common thing, which is great. And that kind of like ties back into our episode from last week, in that you repurpose the kitchen cabinets from upstairs and put them in the basement.
Yes.
Which is great.
Exactly. And then I got my new kitchen upstairs from IKEA that my grandpa paid
Your
for.
favorite.
My favorite, which is so cute. He gave me $10,000 for my kitchen. I think I spent $8,000, which like I balled out in that house. On the kitchen only. And that's where the majority of that 30 comes from.
Okay, let's just take a moment to realize that like we're saying balling out in a kitchen for $8,000 is a lot.
Yeah.
Which like we are now doing kitchen renovations, both of us ourselves right now, and we could not even touch a kitchen for $8,000.
Oh no, I think I
don't
could.
think you can do countertops.
No.
Oh gosh, Olivia.
I texted one of my clients this week, and I was thinking I should post this on our story. Okay. I texted them 3 different kitchens.
From IKEA?
No. All different places. One from Watson Timber Mart, one from Kutchins, remember?
Oh.
Remember that? We went down there.
We have
and one from IKEA. 3 separate kitchens. The most expensive one was $3,600.
Okay, so I'm doing something wrong.
You're doing something wrong. Okay. Absolutely. So I'm going to share that because I was like,
Yeah.
we were in the house, we were in this little house, and they were like, what do you think the kitchen would cost in this house? And this person was like, I did a kitchen. Their mom was like, I did a kitchen 20 years ago, and it was $25,000 at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, I knew that my clients were not like super fancy people. Like they'd be okay with the level of finishes that I am okay with. Like they don't need granite countertops. They have white appliances in their house right now. Like they're, you know what I mean?
Basic.
Yeah. They were like, that is beautiful. I was like, this kitchen cost me $3,600 with the countertops, an island, all of this stuff. So I'm going to share that because I think that my kitchens they're not high end.
No,
but they're like
good.
trendy and super cute.
And I think maybe even something as simple as adding backsplash to like a laminate countertop, it makes it look so much better.
Yes, and they have laminate countertops now that have square edges.
Oh,
like that's, I think there's like simple details that like I've done in my places that good from far but far from good.
Great, I love it.
Okay, so I moved into that house. I lived there, and as I mentioned, I think in our first episode, I was like psychotic about debt.
Yeah.
I paid that house off in its entirety during that time.
Which is incredible. It was 3 years.
3 years.
We're going to do an entire episode on how you did that because that's just insane.
So I had no mortgage on that place. And then my current home that I'm in, so I haven't moved that many times. I bought
Twice.
2 houses.
Personally.
Yeah. Yeah. My current home came up. It was $300,000. And I sold my house for $270,000, we said.
Yeah.
And then I ported that over, and I sold my first house myself, which is hilarious because I've talked about so many times. I'm so cheap. I was like, I'm not paying a real estate agent. And
which we should bleep out.
No, we shouldn't, because I use this as an example to my for sale by owner clients all the time because I ended up paying fees.
Right. And I think that's another whole episode.
It's a whole episode.
Yeah.
But that is why I will never sell my house again. And I advise people not to sell their own house because I had got, once again, it was the time of multiple offers. I got 3 offers, and both of the people who were not represented by agents were like out to lunch. Like they offered me like $100,000 on the house.
Oh my God.
And then the other one was like close. And I actually walked away with more money when I used someone that was like represented by an agent and actually like was serious about buying a house.
Wow.
Sold that house. I ported the mortgage over, or I ported the funds over, and I had a tiny little mortgage. I think I had probably a $30,000 mortgage because I bought my current house for $290,000, which is also amazing.
Amazing.
And
what do you think it's worth today?
Probably 6.
Not in its current state of renovation, but
yeah, I think by the time we're renovating it, by the time we're done renovating it, it'll probably be worth like
6.
At least 6, actually. Right. Now that like my original renovations, I was thinking 6, but now like new kitchen, balls to the wall, we might even be approaching 7.
Wow.
Now I want to talk about things that we compromised on in our first house.
Yes.
So I compromised on the finishes, and I knew that. Well, I didn't have the ability. I thought I had the ability to get it up to speed.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to say one more thing about my first house. So my first house just came back on the market. And when I bought my house that I'm in now, my agent at the time was trying to convince me to keep my Brentwood house. Like they were like, put someone on the main floor, rent out the basement. That thing's a cash cow for what you paid for it. And I was like, absolutely. I'd had like a few kind of like poor experiences with tenants in the basement throughout those 3 years. And I was like, I don't want to be a landlord, which is hilarious now.
It's so funny.
I don't want to be a landlord. I just want to like move to the country and like have chickens and live like
a simple life, which is far from what you're living.
Yes, absolutely. I should have kept it, and I always felt like if it came back on the market, I would buy it. But then it came back on the market. And these people, so they owned it for 4 years?
Yeah,
4 years, I think. Destroyed the house.
I showed the property. It was top 5 the worst smelling homes I had ever been in the 6 years I've been selling real estate.
My mom wanted to go through it, but I could not bear the sound of her gasp.
Screeching.
All of Corona would have heard it because we all put a lot of work into that property, and she was like heartbroken by the photos alone. But she was like, we should go through it and I was like, Mom, you can't go there. And they didn't leave.
For her. Yeah, the sellers were home, which is not ever a good experience. And
And this is the kicker. So they bought it for $270 and they sold it for $370? $360. So they destroyed this house. They did everything they could. Like they ripped the towel bar off the wall. Tiles were missing in the shower. They had not done the roof. There was like leaks in the roof and plastic bags taped to the ceiling.
So bad.
And they still made money.
Right.
What a beautiful thing investing in real estate is.
Absolutely. If you spend enough time in the market, you're going to make money despite what you do to this house.
Yeah, and they were renting in a townhouse before. So like they, made that jump. They would have rented for those years and spent money and destroyed someone else's property, and instead they destroyed their own, but they still came out ahead.
Yeah.
It's great.
So it's just another sign to get into the market. If you're a first-time home buyer, just get into the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is funny is with your house, and this is something that we see first-time home buyers come up. So I have a listing right now in Wallaceburg, and it has a shared drive.
Oh
and
my
every
gosh.
single time I see a shared drive, I think of you.
Right.
So a shared drive is
house.
something that you can't change.
Yeah. You're right. So like finishes in your first house, if the kitchen was ugly or there was carpet, done. You can take care of that with some like hard work. A shared driveway is something. And even I think a single driveway can be a pain in the butt, but a shared driveway is just like next level pain in the ass. So I shared a driveway. When I first moved into this house, it was a tenanted property. And the tenant was fine, like
Next door to you was?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was tenanted to start. So they kind of kept to themselves, and there was 2 different tenants in like the duration of when we lived there. And then the owner moved back in, and I was like, this is going to be so much better. They're going to be taking care of the property, like thinking that the homeowner would be better than the tenants. And I'm going to just say, be careful what you wish for, because that was not the case.
Yes.
This woman moved in, and her adult son moved in with her. Maybe 2 of them at one point.
Definitely.
Because
he moved out. Yeah.
Yes.
He moved into my place when he moved out of there.
Right. So 2 of them did. The one I think was maybe he had been, I don't know the proper terms for this, but he was like a peeping Tom, and like was maybe house arrest. Like it wasn't a good situation.
He was actually convicted of this, right?
I don't know what the final I don't know what it ended up with, but anyways, he was like waiting to hear how that was going to finish up. And so like I was living alone still, like my partner at the time would come home on weekends, and so I was there. So whatever, doors were locked, security system on. But like if with the shared driveway, sometimes like a vehicle will be blocking one side or the other, so you have to communicate with these people. And
you guys had a lot of people at your house always. Like when the boys were home on the weekends, you were young. We would go there, you'd have parties in the garage.
Yes. So there was always like, we could probably fit 10 cars in that driveway, because it was another thing I sacrificed on was it was only concrete in the backyard. There was
no grass.
0 grass. So that's something that we had to make a compromise on to be able to get into the market. Anyways, so many cars in the driveway. So he would come and like knock on my door at 3 a.m. to be like, I can't get out of the driveway, which I'm a bad neighbor for doing that. I feel bad about that. But like, I was like kind of terrified of these people, to the point where I would not open the back door to speak to him. I would like open the back
like
window.
The chain.
Yeah. I would open the back window, kind of like a McDonald's drive-through, and just be like, can I help you? And he's like, you need to move your car. I'm like, oh shit, sorry.
And then you're scared to come out.
Yeah, but I did. It was fine. Another thing with the shared driveway was, where do you put the snow? I think our winters are getting less and less, but at that time, where do you put the snow? So like you're in your shared driveway, you either have to go all the way one way or the other.
Right.
You can't pile it next to your house, because that's not going to be a good. So that was a pain in the ass. And then like there was these 2 guys, probably in their 30s, living in the house next to me. I don't think they worked. And they would just shovel their half of the driveway, knowing that I lived in this house by myself. Right. And I'm like, come on, I gotta go and shovel this whole driveway, and it was long.
But the worst kicker of that property was the mom.
Yes,
she was the worst. Never mind the peeping Tom. The mom is an absolute Looney Tune.
Yes. So this whole thing circled back into Olivia's life, like years later.
Literally years later. And how did we connect the 2? I guess you knew that the son had lived.
Yes, and at the time the son was seeing one of our friends, and we put it all together.
So she came. Her son was living in one of my apartments with his girlfriend. She came to view the property, and like I got this call from this random number, and she was like, "Is there a Olivia Bondi?" And I was like, "Yeah," and she went absolutely off the rails on me about what I was charging for rent, the condition of my property, that I had just spent like so much money renovating. Yeah. Like it was literally immaculate, brand spanking new. They were the first people to ever live there.
Right.
The stairs leading to the property, the fire code. She called the fire department on me. She went bonkers, and this guy wasn't even on the list.
Right.
To the point where I had to say to my tenant, like, this woman is not allowed on my property.
Right.
And then Jenna realized that it was the woman who used to live beside her, right. And I feel terrible for her sons, because I cannot even imagine having someone like that as a mother. That is so overbearing. Her kid was 35 years old, and he moved into my apartment, and the mom was calling me.
Like, come on. It's
And
ridiculous.
he didn't even live there. He was not even on the lease.
That's crazy. Yeah.
That's the kicker. But
So it's so funny that like a first home ended up coming full circle to your rental property.
yeah, and I think that's part of it. So like if neighbors is your non-negotiable, sometimes you can't afford the property in the country on your first home.
Right.
I don't like people. I don't want to live beside people. My neighbors in Corona, I couldn't stand them. They
Maddie's
made me
neighbors?
crazy. Maddie's neighbors, they made me crazy. All of these like just people in my space. I don't love it. I deal with people all day. I don't want neighbors.
Yeah.
Could I have bought my home that I'm in now as my first home? No.
Right.
At the time, I couldn't afford it.
At the time, right, exactly.
Yeah.
You needed that stepping stone to get you there.
Yeah.
So like, sure, you might have to put up with these crazy neighbors for a few years, but you just got to get into the market and that will pay off.
And now I appreciate no neighbors because I realize how annoying neighbors are. Like if I not have lived there, because we didn't really experience that like in my parents' house. And it was probably because my parents always lived in a really nice neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't have like as many, like there was no rental properties or anything like that.
Right, yes.
And that's something to note as well. Like your first home doesn't have to be as nice as your parents' home.
Yes, that's a very good point.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Like when you're raised on a certain standard, and you're like, oh, you know, I had an ensuite bath and all these things. Like that's not happening.
Walk-in closet. Like you're not going to get that.
Your parents worked to get there, and they started where you are now as well.
Exactly. You just have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
That is a funny thing that you will never be able to know the neighbors until you move into the house.
Yeah.
Like it's just like kind of
even now, we can look up their names.
Yeah.
We can do research. Like I always tell buyers, peep into their backyard.
Right.
The backyard is telling. Usually, if they're going to be, the hard part is the people that are super anal. Like my neighbor's backyard was immaculate, but they were the kind of neighbors that were like, Olivia, there's a weed growing into your air conditioning unit. And I was like, I don't care.
Right.
Like, don't knock on my door to tell me there's a weed growing into my air conditioner unit.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out eventually.
Right. So, so they look clean. They look like they would be good neighbors, but then they're annoying.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is a risk with any property that you buy, unless you're going to buy in
the country.
Yeah.
And just set boundaries with your neighbors.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Like, you know, you guys have done a great job with Maddie's. Like,
yeah.
Hey, how are you? Beeline it into the house.
Yeah,
you know,
run.
Don't have time. I'm on the phone, whatever it is.
Fake a phone call. That's a great idea.
Fake a phone call is a good tactic.
Exactly. I think that's about it for today.
I think that's it for today.
Yeah, I love it. It's kind of nice to reminisce on like our first time home buying experience, and like I still really enjoy working with first time home buyers because there's just this level of excitement.
It's so fun.
Even when you have to go to a home that like isn't the dream home, like sure it's fun to show your $3 million property on the parkway, like that I'm sure is an experience. Not that I've shown it, but like there is just this excitement about first time home buyers and like starting that journey.
It's the best.
Yeah,
it's the absolute best. And I still like you get that giddiness for them. You know what I mean? When you're like, oh, it's so fun.
When it's like a new couple, or like a young couple, and they're doing this together, or a single person and they're doing it independently. Like there's just this like feeling about it.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
I love it. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah. Bye.